Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter. And today we are talking about whether we believe the Arizona Cardinals are actually a threat to steal Anthony Campanile from the Jaguars. Now, we did an article, obviously, on Jaguars on SI you can read, where we talk about the Browns and the Bills and Grant Udinski. I'll obviously talk about that here as well. Like I've expressed, I think Grant's a very serious candidate in Cleveland. I think there's a very real chance he gets the job. Like, to me, it's going to come down to him or Nate Shieldhouse if they want to go with a young guy, or Jim Schwartz if they just absolutely don't want to lose Jim Schwartz. And to me, though, the interesting thing is looking at the fact that these guys have multiple teams that have shown interest in them. I mean, Grant Udinski is interviewing with the Buffalo Bills this week. And one of only a few guys interviewing with the Bills who hasn't worked for the Bills previously under Sean McDermott and hasn't, worked with Josh Allen. So either they're going all in on finding a guy with Josh Allen experience and Grant has no chance to get the job, or maybe they're looking for somebody outside of that circle. Maybe that's their answer, whereas Grant Udinski would be a leading candidate. But to me, my ultimate sense is it's likely more so the former. I think that it is more likely that Brian Dable or Joe Brady get that job. They just try to keep some consistency and stability around Josh Allen, what really his day-to-day looks like. I don't think any team should obviously make a hire, etc., based on one player, but it happens a good bit. I mean, Liam Cohen was the right coach for the Jaguars, regardless of, what happens with Trevor Lawrence. But his work with quarterbacks and the Jaguars' need to see Trevor Lawrence elevate his game was obviously a big reason that Liam Cohen ultimately got that Jaguars job. And it's ultimately a big reason why the Buffalo Bills are going to look for a guy who can work with Josh Allen. With that said, I think Cleveland is more likely to be a threat to take Udinski because I think Cleveland is more likely to offer Udinski. And any team that offers a guy to be a head coach, I can't imagine how difficult that would be for a coach to turn down. There are only 32 of those jobs in the world. Only so many of them come open each year. Yeah, 10 came open this year. It happened in 2022, but I haven't done numbers. I can't imagine it happens all that often. There is no guarantee that you will ever be, offered a head coaching job again. If you're offered one, I'm firmly in belief that you probably need to strike while the iron's hot. Like, even if it's not a great job. I mean, Gus Bradley took the 2013 Jaguars job. That was a terrible job. League's worst facilities, league's worst roster, no quarterback, no path to a quarterback, number 2 pick in a terrible draft. So, I mean, I think coaches are going to take jobs regardless of what the strength or, veracity of it is. But with that in mind, I think if Cleveland offered Udinski, I'm not sure there's a way for him to say no. And I don't want to speak for him. I obviously don't know what he personally would do. But I would imagine that'd be a pretty hard thing to turn down. And I just think the Browns are more likely to offer Udinski that chance and to offer Udinski that job as things stand today than the Buffalo Bills are. As for Camp on the defensive side, he interviewed the Miami Dolphins. They went on to hire Jeff Hafley, which, he always kind of seemed like a Jeff Hafley backup plan. If Jeff Hafley, ended up in Atlanta or Tennessee or, Vegas, something like that. Never really seemed like a threat for Miami, just because it always seemed like Jeff Hafley was like their target. Even though Camp, has worked with John Eric Sullivan, has worked at Miami before, he made a ton of sense as a guy for them to, at least bring in on the interview process. He interviews with the Baltimore Ravens. Now that one's a hard one to figure out, guys. They've interviewed, I believe, 16 to 17 candidates. I have to believe, though, that the timing of Jesse Minter taking himself out of the Browns coaching search means that he's either about to be the Baltimore Ravens head coach or the Las Vegas Raiders head coach. I mean, you saw Mike McDaniel do it a couple days ago where he pulled himself out of the Brown search, and then very shortly after gets announced that he's going to be the new Los Angeles Chargers offensive coordinator. So I would imagine something similar happens with Minter. Maybe in the next 12 to 24 hours, we know where he goes, and he's the next domino to fall. He obviously won't be in Cleveland. If he goes to Baltimore, though, that means that eliminates a team in the running for camp, and that just leaves the Arizona Cardinals. So I think there's a good reason to believe that the Arizona Cardinals, at least as of right now, maybe the Bills had them late. I don't know. You never really know this time of year. I mean, nobody even knew that Camp had interviewed with Arizona the first time, let alone getting a second in-person interview. So you never know this time of year. I mean, exactly which way teams are moving. But I would ultimately say for the Jaguars, I do think there are enough reasons to think Arizona could be at least a threat. And a lot of it has to do with the reasons I said before. Like, obviously, if you're Camp, you have to have a lot of confidence the Jags will have a good defense next season as well, after they had one this season. I mean, there's no reason for you not to believe that. And as a coach, you have to have that confidence. You have to have, I don't think ego is even the right word, but you just have to have that swagger about you that you're not thinking with the mind of, okay, next year might not be so great. Because obviously, I think for the Jaguars defense, things are pointing up next year. They'll get Travis Hunter. Maybe they'll see what they have in Caleb Bransaw, but they'll probably upgrade a couple pieces with younger, faster players via the draft, maybe in free agency. So I think ultimately, if you're Camp, you're not thinking what happens if next year the defense isn't as good. But if you're offered a head coaching job with Arizona and you're Camp and you've been a long-time assistant coach who's cut his teeth at the high school level, comes from a long line of football coaches, probably like the best football family in all of Jersey. I mean, there's some crazy stat where it's like double digits, like 15 to 20 straight New Jersey high school state championships had a team that was coached by at least one member of the Campanile family. It's absolutely bonkers. You're telling me if Arizona offered him a chance to be the first, Camp to become a head coach, that he wouldn't just see that as a massive honor and likely wouldn't jump on it? Now, yes, there are some reasons to kind of be iffy on Arizona. It's in the hardest division in the NFL, for one. I mean, you are definite little brother. I mean, the two teams in the NFC Championship right now in the NFC West, 3 of the 4 best teams in the NFC last year were in the NFC West. The only team that wasn't an NFC West team playing last weekend was the Chicago Bears. They run that conference. They are an incredible division. So going to coach against Sean McVay, going to coach against Mike McDonald, going to coach against Kyle Shanahan, those being your opponents for 6 games a year, I mean, that's a tough situation. And then you have to take into account they don't have the most talented roster. I'm sure that they believe that they have a roster that's more talented than however many games they've won the last 2 seasons. But the reality is in the NFL, you are what your record says that you are. I'm sure that good coaching can get more, out of a team than maybe that they've gotten to this point. And I'm sure that Camp would be able to get more out of their defense than, say, Jonathan Gannon was able to, just because I think Camp is obviously, a better coach, a better defensive mind, etc. The quarterback question to me is the biggest one, though. I think Camp has enough connections where he could find a quality offensive coordinator, but you need to have the quarterback. I can't imagine that they go crawling back to Kyler after everything that's happened. They're not really in position to draft a quarterback this year. Maybe if you hire him and just know it's a rebuilding job and that it's kind of a throwaway year and that you're going to try to swing for a quarterback the next year. That's the only thing I can think of. But I do think the Cardinals are a threat. I think the fact that they want to speak to him, and maybe they have a different favorite. Maybe they have somebody else that they've spoken to that they want to make their guy. But as things stand today, I truly think that they are a legitimate threat to the Jaguars and to the Jaguars keeping their star defense coordinator. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode. We'll be back next time.